The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Ashley Eckstein, the voice of Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everyone, I'm Angela Sealana, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, Virtue and Vice. Today, we're talking everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, from movies to books to TV shows and more. We're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in Star Wars, and we're continuing our ongoing series, The Force and Spirituality. So knowing who we have on deck today, I expect we'll be having some fun exploring this topic. And joining us, first of all, the Guardian of the Whills, Robert King. Welcome, Robert.
Hey, Angela. Good to be here.
Thanks for being here. And we also have Mudhorn, Andrew Hermiz. Welcome back and glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Yes. All right. So before we dive in, we would like to give a shout out to, I would say, some people living out the virtue of charity. Declan M, Adam R, Brantley M, James D, and Matt L, all of whom are patrons. Some of our patrons who make this show possible. So thank you so much. And if you too, listening, appreciate StarQuest's mission and want to help us continue our shows, please consider becoming a patron. Learn more at sqpn.com/give. Okay, guys. So this discussion will be kind of experimental, I think. Really rough outline, just threw some ideas out there to you before we started recording, not too long before. So I'm really curious to see how this is going to go. So when I messaged you and, you saw the topic, and I'm just wondering what first of all came to mind. Was there something or someone who immediately came to mind when you thought of virtue and vice? So, Andrew, why don't we start with you? Anything?
I mean, immediately, I thought of Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. I mean, I mean, it's the Anakin Skywalker. Mm-hmm. You can't help it because, at least from my perspective, that's when I first got into Star Wars. Like a lot of people, and a lot of people older than me, their first introduction to it was the original trilogy, and you can boil it down to just a story about good and evil, and specifically, you have Luke Skywalker, who's this really good character, and then you have Darth Vader, who's just like evil personified, with redemption at the end. But for 3 full movies until the very end, Darth Vader is just pure evil, along with Palpatine, I guess. But and then Luke is just like, this kid from the desert that was kind of just sprung onto this journey, and like any good hero's journey, he had his challenges and his temptations, and everything that comes with that. But he was, he's the good guy, and Darth Vader is a bad guy. So that's really the first two. It's probably the easiest answer to give, but those are the first 2 characters and the first 2 examples I think of when we think of virtue versus vice.
Yeah, I also thought of a character. I thought of Jabba the Hutt.
Nice.
The vice. The vice.
Gluttony, I'm assuming.
Yeah, gluttony, indulgence. Just everything about that guy is
sure
just screams gluttony to me. Anytime we see him.
And lust too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
lust
all the vices of the flesh. Yeah.
And even just his design, it just says gross.
Yeah. Totally.
Robert, what about you? What came to mind when you saw the topic or when you think about this topic?
Well, I made the mistake of studying philosophy in school. And so I thought of the idea of virtue ethics, which is one of the three big ethical systems in philosophy. There's virtue ethics, which is about how the decisions you make form and mold your character. And then there's deontological ethics, which is basically rules-based ethics. It's in any situation, there's a right thing to do and everything else is wrong. And then there's utilitarian ethics, which is kind of the default ethics for our culture at the moment. Utilitarian ethics is kind of like what works best to get the best result we can manage. And so I was thinking about how these different kind of approaches to ethics, to good and evil, played out in the Star Wars universe. And yeah, I mean, Andrew, you were talking about Luke and Vader as kind of, literally light and dark, good and evil symbols. And yet each of them has a transformation, right? Mm-hmm. And like the way that their characters transform and the things that kind of mark them as being good and evil are complicated. Right. Angela and I were chatting a little bit before you came on, and we were talking about how, with a franchise as huge as Star Wars, but even going back to the original trilogy, it was a complex effort to get those first movies made, and just like figuring out how to communicate to the audience that this is a good character and that is a bad character. It's complicated and it's not entirely consistent, but it's fascinating, and somehow it works, because I don't know. Star Wars is one of the things that planted that seed of wanting to strive for goodness and recognize that evil is just not acceptable. That's Star Wars planted that in my heart. So,
wow, that's really touching. Warm, fuzzy moments with Star Wars. We have plenty of them on this podcast. But it's also true, yeah, that these characters are not shallow characters, right? They have a lot of layers, as Shrek would say, and. And, when we throw around words like virtue and vice, there's a lot of different interpretations that may come to mind, as you said, Robert, depending on what sort of system you're ascribing to. So with us being like Catholic nerds, I thought, let's just see what the Catholic Catechism says. And we'll have these ground rules that we can kind of lay for the discussion. Maybe not rules. I'm not trying to be deontological, but it's more of a game that we're playing today. So on the section in the Catechism about virtues, because there actually is one, it starts with this. A virtue is an habitual and firm disposition to do the good. It allows the person not only to perform good acts, but to give the best of himself. The virtuous person tends toward the good with all his sensory and spiritual powers. He pursues the good and chooses it in concrete actions. So from that, I'm getting habits, dispositions. I like the phrase sensory and spiritual powers. I thought that was cool. That's kind of Star Wars-y. And pursuing and choosing in concrete actions. So that's virtue and being virtuous. And then vice, we have here in the glossary of the Catechism, it defines vice as a habit acquired by repeated sin in violation of the proper norms of human morality. The vices are often linked with the 7 capital sins. And this is where maybe Anakin comes into play. It says, repentance for sin and confession may restore grace to a soul, but the removal of the ingrained disposition to sin or vice requires much effort and self-denial until the contrary virtue is acquired. Interesting. So, with that being said about what we're sort of playing with here with virtue and vice, is anyone excited to share an example of vice in Star Wars besides Jabba the Hutt? Well, I mean,
Jabba's a great one.
He really is.
Maybe we could look at Anakin, because that's like a whole, I mean, it's a Crayola crayon box of vice examples.
Yeah, well, he's
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I would say fear and cowardice are sort of like the primary vices that he starts off with, right? Because you always watch, if you watch from episode 1 in numerical order, and you see people, like I love watching reaction videos on YouTube of people watching Star Wars for the first time. They're like, oh my gosh, how could that innocent little boy like have become this monster? And it's always, Yoda saying he has a lot of fear, right? So I just thought about how that fear leads to like this self-preservation and this selfishness, this insular behavior that sort of like, turns you in on yourself. And that is not generally what virtue is about, right?
It makes him unable to trust other people, to trust Obi-Wan, to trust Yoda, to trust the council. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think fear is at the heart of it. Yeah. It kind of begins with it and ends with it. Because, it starts off like you said, it's more of a innocent fear. Like it comes from a place of good intentions. Like he wants he's afraid, for his friends. He's afraid for Padme. I mean, ultimately it's that fear of losing her that kind of where that final turn takes place. And, Palpatine is the one that kind of sees that and takes advantage of that. Right. So, it's fear, and then it turns into anger, and you have anger and wrath, and that's obviously a big part of it. I mean,
envy
hate,
also.
Yeah. Hate. And it compels him or it influences him to look at people like Obi-Wan, as, like he said, he calls him his enemy, and it was such a turn from him being his master to now being his enemy, and it all stemmed from fear. Obi-Wan was never really afraid of Anakin, which is, I guess, one of Obi-Wan's faults too. He should have probably been more afraid of. He should have finished the job, right? And as we saw on the show, he had more than one chance to do it. But I think Obi-Wan always saw that little boy, that scared little boy, and that's always who Anakin, and then later Darth Vader was. And at the end of the day, was that little boy until. At the end of Return of the Jedi, when he had that redemption and made the ultimate sacrifice, being the quote unquote chosen one, and fulfilling that destiny. But yeah, it all, like you mentioned, like the Catechism says, it starts from habit, and all these bad habits just sort of built up, like, where you see it in the prequels, obviously. It started out well-intentioned, but, Palpatine, saw what he could take advantage of in him, And I guess if you want to look at the vice of the Jedi Order and the Council, the vice of, I don't know, pride, where they didn't take it as seriously as they should have. And that also played a big part into why he, ended up the way he did. So, I think he is probably the ultimate example in Star Wars lore of at least in where you can like just kind of pull any vice and find the virtue on the other side of it, whether it's with a character like Luke or Obi-Wan, or even if you go into the animated series Ahsoka, like there's always like a character that is sort of the polar opposite virtue from his vice. So I could probably do this whole episode on Anakin, but I think that's is the ultimate example that we could talk about.
Well, and I think fear is really that root motive for him. And I think it's important to like distinguish between the emotion of fear and the vice of fear, or maybe like it's hard to call it cowardice because you don't think of Anakin as a coward, do you? But when he's facing something that's really important to him, he is terrified to let it go. And when he is thinking about the future, he dwells on the bad things that he fears might happen. And so, there's the emotion of fear that lets us know, hey, something bad might happen. And that can be a good thing. It can be a warning. But to dwell on it as if it's inevitable, as if there's no other possibility, and you see when he becomes Vader, that fear turns to something even darker. It turns into despair, I think. It turns into the worst has absolutely happened, and there is no hope for anything good to come out of this. And I think that's what drives Vader to continue serving the Emperor, because he thinks that everything good has already been lost and there's no possibility for it left. That's the trap that his dwelling on fear has led him into.
Yeah, so I guess really that turning point for him came when his son shows that he still believes in his father. So he has the virtue of faith, right? And the virtue of love, of course, being his son. But I think really it is that faith and that hope that you mentioned, Robert, that really are the turning point. There's also this tradition of calling certain virtues human virtues and other virtues theological virtues. So the theological virtues being faith, hope, and love. And those are virtues that we believe God gives to us as gifts that, we can't just sort of summon them up, within ourselves. But that, there's something beyond us that is required to practice, those virtues. So the idea that, Luke has those good things in him that are really sort of the key to unlock that in Anakin, for him to see that hope, to have that faith, to see a different outcome for himself and for, the rest of the galaxy, I guess. I like that. I like the idea that it was more than just something that somebody sort of willed, for the situation, right? Like if I just work hard enough, or if I just, practice hard enough or whatever, we have all these thoughts that if I just do this, then this great outcome will happen. But it's more than just that, right? Like there's something that's mysterious that one day is there and you're just like, wow, I don't know. I've had that experience. You pray for somebody and it's this thing that seems to just come to them, over time that, you can't really persuade someone, in that kind of a direction. It's just this beautiful seed that's planted. I don't know. You can't kind of get what I'm saying here.
Yeah. It's no. Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh no, yeah. I was just gonna agree with what you were saying, and I think in the case of Luke, it's to your point. It was more than just like, oh, I'm a Jedi, I'm going to train and I'm going to do all these things. And no, I mean, he had to like resist the temptation to join his father, like to rule the galaxy. Like could you imagine? Like they could have done it, if he turned to the dark side. He looked good in all black. I think he dug that look, and
it's a slimming color.
Right, exactly. Yeah. He wouldn't have to train as hard, right? So I think, that's another thing. It's not, again, we could, beat that drum where it's not just a case of, good versus evil. There's a lot of, temptation that he had to resist, a lot of, turmoil he had to go through. He found out he has a twin sister. He had an awkward scene with, so there's a lot that he had to.
That was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot to process. Yeah. I mean, he probably needs a lot of therapy. He probably would have, if in the sequel trilogy, I thought you probably would have fared a lot better, if you went to therapy, I think. But, yeah. So again, I just wanted to reiterate, like, I'm glad Star Wars, like a lot of times Star Wars has a reputation of being just, especially the original trilogy, like, oh, it's just a simple story. It's just, here are the good guys, here are the bad guys, and here are some toys. Like Star Wars, I think, resonates till now for a reason, and I think it's because of a lot of those, like, these deeper themes and the sort of character depth that you can get into, and relate to as well. Because, us as humans, we fight, this sort of, fight of trying to be more virtuous and try to resist temptation and sin. So, I think that's a big reason why Star Wars resonates throughout all this time.
Yeah, for sure. There was one character that I thought of when it comes to Vice that I wanted to talk to you all about, because I want to kind of dissect, sort of like what we just did a little bit, dissect what is behind their vice specifically. Maul.
I am glad we're talking about Maul. I love, yes. There's so much here. Let's do it.
Well, just to set this up. So we get so many different stages of Maul, which is one of the reasons that I really enjoy this character. And if you're not familiar with the Clone Wars, then you're missing a lot, even of Rebels. You're missing some really great stages in the character arc of Maul. But he starts off very shallow. We don't spend a lot of time with him as an actual person. He's more so like just a pawn in the movies. But when we get into his story in the animated series, there is so much more to his sense of self and his sense of what he is owed and how he should enact his vengeance against Obi-Wan. I mean, it's just constantly like, I just think of Maul screaming, Kenobi, like in the desert and everything.
Yes.
And then even like Spider Legs Maul, just this guy
yes.
that just has willed himself through anger and spite to live. It's just, so I want to get your thoughts on sort of what do you think is beneath all that, and really like what makes him tick, and what are those, what's behind those vices? Like, where does that all come from, do you think?
Well, I think it's great to look at Maul in relation to Vader, because they kind of have similar arcs in a lot of ways. And Maul is given so many chances at redemption and conversion, as it were. And Vader is able to take at least that last opportunity to redeem himself and return to the light. And I think it's because, as Anakin, he was afraid to lose what was good in his life. And he always had a desire for something good from the outset. Whereas Maul, I think, was already turned inward on, Anakin wanted something good that was outside himself. He wanted a relationship with the Jedi Council, and he wanted a relationship with Padme, and he wanted to be connected to others. Maul wanted power for himself. He always wanted that to be self-sufficient and to have the control of the universe in himself. And I think that's what drew him to Palpatine in the first place, and made him a strong and powerful Sith apprentice. And that's certainly what drove him after his delegification to drag himself back to a position of power, of being a threat even to Palpatine himself. But in the end, I think the one he was most a threat to was his own self. He never was able to, he was offered opportunities to come back with, I'm thinking of the arc he had with Ahsoka at the end of Clone Wars, and the arc he had with Ezra in Rebels, and that really tragic, touching moment in the end when he and Kenobi finally did meet up again, and Kenobi explicitly offers him an opportunity to find peace and virtue, and to give up the darkness within him. But I don't think he was able to. Well, obviously he wasn't able to, but I think he wasn't able to because it was such a deeply rooted vice. It was such a habit. He didn't know how else to see the world. He didn't know what else there could be.
Yeah, that was really good.
Andrew, you want to add to that?
I mean, is this? Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's so tragic. It's almost like, well, it's not almost. Literally, he had a lack of faith in himself, and I mean, he had like all the possible virtues, right? Because he was such a survivor. Because he had that strong will, and to just keep on, like, the whole spiral-like thing, and just his whole life is just, he's so mission focused. Like, that could have all been used towards the good, but because of everything you pointed out, and because of he had a lot of, for sure, envy and jealousy of this sort of, whether it was like the lack of power that he had or lack of favor that he had with Palpatine or, whoever he was, trying to persuade, depending on the arc. All those vices just, drove him down to a place where he just couldn't conquer it. But the qualities were there. He could have been one heck of a Jedi or just one heck of a good, person, if you wanted to be, sort of like, like Ahsoka. Like she doesn't, Ahsoka always, doesn't really define herself as anything, but she's a good person at the end of the day. So, just like her, if she decided to not be, she has all the power and the qualities to be the worst person and be very powerful in a very negative way. So yeah, Maul is just such a tragic character. And yeah, if you haven't seen if your only exposure to Darth Maul is the Phantom Menace, please watch the Clone Wars and Rebels, because they really explore that character a lot.
Yeah, I'm even thinking of the very end of Maul, his arc. I'll try to avoid spoilers a little bit, but because it's so good, and I would hate for someone to get spoiled on that. But he expresses that ingrained vice within him with his last dying breath. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the tragedy of his character, is that he's constant. I think he really ended up seeing himself as a victim at the latter part of his life. And whenever you get into that mentality, it's really difficult to embrace virtue, because I think, again, it goes back to fear. If you feel like you're a victim, you feel like you've been wronged, then it's very easy to fall into that vulnerability, fear-based mentality. And it's really difficult to come out of the victim mentality with a sense of, oh yeah, now I need to help other people, because all you're worried about is getting hurt again, or making other people feel like you felt, well, if I got hurt this way, then other people have to experience, that's why Maul was constantly hunting Obi-Wan, and is because, okay, well, you made me suffer, now I'm going to make you suffer, right? So is that whole thought of, fear, victimhood, that I think, I'm really being taught by this discussion, just reinforcing a lot of the ideas of, our faith and our spirituality, that has been passed down over the millennia, right? About just how to maintain that healthy spirit is to stay away from those things.
Well, that's what vice does, is it like blinds you to all of the other possibilities. Maul couldn't see anything except his vengeance against Obi-Wan, and it blinded him to so many other things that he could have done that would have been good for him and good for those around him. And that's what Luke was able to do with Vader, is, in that scene on the bridge on Endor, when Vader says, it's too late for me, my son. And, but even as he's saying it, you could hear, you don't need the Force to sense the conflict within him, right? You can hear it in his voice that he's beginning to see another possibility. And this is what I love about Ahsoka's character so much. And that I think makes her a real model of virtue, is that she is always discovering new possibilities because her attitude is basically one of virtue, one of openness, one of curiosity, one of compassion. And so her world continues to always get bigger and bigger. There are always more possibilities, more good things that she can do. She's not trapped by a focus on something evil. And when she does feel trapped, she recognizes it and she looks for a way out of it.
Yeah. See, what's interesting about Ahsoka is that she was Anakin's Padawan, right?
Yeah.
So when I think of Ahsoka, I think of the virtue of justice. I think she has a very strong sense of justice. And that's what drives her to walk away from the Jedi Order, because she sees a lot of injustice. And clearly there was a lot of injustice done to her, but she doesn't see how she could practice that sense of justice that's so strong within her, within that system. And, that, I mean, the real world applications of that, you could do like a whole series on that. But,
sure,
helping people when they need it is something that she really emphasizes. And then I also think about Order 66, when the clones are literally programmed to kill her, and she goes out of her way to save as many of them as possible because she knows that it would be unjust for her to kill them because they have no choice in what they're doing. And she knows that they're good people. And so I really think of her as having that strong sense of justice, but at the same time, it's interesting, she obviously she's her own person, but she did learn a lot from Anakin. And I wonder if she got any of that sense of justice from him. What I can think of particularly is when, of course, Anakin feels snubbed by the Order for not being given the rank of master. And I think he has that sense of, well, this is clearly not fair. It's not just because I am the chosen one. And why won't they give me master? And so I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for one thing, Anakin was someone who didn't care about, would the council, I mean, obviously he cared to have a position because he, like you said, he felt he deserved it, but he didn't care what they thought. Like if he had enough confidence in himself and how powerful he was that if there was a situation that he could take care of, he's going to go take care of it. And, the heck with authority and, whatever a council wants to say or the Jedi Order. And I think Ahsoka takes all the good that comes with that. Like, she, I think that's, again, a large part of why she doesn't align with the Jedi Order is because, if she sees something that's wrong, she's going to try and fix it. She's not going to worry about any sort of rules or balance or anything like that. If someone might not deserve it, like I think Order 66 was a good example. She's going to try and help people. So I think, yeah, she definitely got that influence from Anakin, and also that stubbornness too. But because sometimes she thinks she can take on more than she can. That's some of the, I guess, the bad. But yeah, I think that's probably the first thing I think of as far as what she got being his Padawan.
Robert, I know you're a big Ahsoka fan too. So, I mean, is there a particular a particular virtue that you think of when you think of Ahsoka?
I mean, I really like justice. That rings very true. I was also thinking of courage, or in more traditional language, fortitude. That willingness to do what is good and right, despite the risk to oneself. Despite the risk of failure, despite the risk of harm to oneself, despite the risk of death, ultimately. She's willing to put her life on the line for what she believes is good and true and right. And she's willing to, how do I put this? She's willing to put her life on the line for what she believes in, and she's also willing to put her life out there to learn what is good and true and right. She's willing to admit her mistakes and continue. So she's putting her life out not just for what she believes, but for what she discovers to be good. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. And when you brought up fortitude, now Andrew might get mad at me, but when I think of fortitude, I think of a sequel character, and I think of Finn, because he is so courageous. Yeah. I mean, like every situation that Finn is in, he is putting himself out there, as you were saying, Robert. I mean, he is just, I will do anything for my friends. I will do anything. I'll take on Phasma. I will, I'll go out there and face the First Order myself. So I really think he is an outstanding example of fortitude in the sequels. And I don't know, Andrew, if you're mad or not, but I did.
I'm not mad at the example. I'm mad at how they treated his character. I thought, his character had way more potential than how it ended up. You show him in the trailer with holding a lightsaber, and you just don't pay that off. Like, come on. Anyway, no, I think he's, again, to talk about like just getting the short end of the stick his whole life, and then still coming out of it like, he's not like one of those like brooding sort of characters that's like, like he's not like a Batman type of character where he's doing good, but he has a dark side. Like he's a positive, he's positive, he's like he's funny, he has a personality. He didn't let like everything the First Order did to him, like get to him at all. Like he's, and I think that shows a lot of fortitude. I think that shows, like facing that sort of, those trials and that adversity, and still coming out of it, with a, not only like did he get to escape, but he joined the resistance and was, willing to be heroic and willing to put his life on the line as well. And, for the greater good. And that, someone like him, you probably, you wouldn't put it against them if they just wanted they escaped and just go live your life. Like, no, he was like one of the, one of the few that chose to be part of the resistance and fight the good fight, and I think is a great example of fortitude.
Mm-hmm.
And a great example of growth in fortitude, like of growing in virtue as well, because like from the beginning, his character is very much defined by his fear. His fear of the the death of his fellow stormtroopers, the fear of, he's constantly running away. He tries to run away at Maz Kanata's palace. He tries to run away in the escape pod when Rose catches him. He's constantly giving into his fear, stopping, reevaluating, and then despite his fear, kind of in the face of his fear, stepping up to do what he sees needs to be done in order to do what is good, what is to help his friends. And so what makes him courageous, what gives him fortitude is recognition that his love is stronger than his fear.
I feel like I'm in Star Wars church right now. Do you guys have what other examples do you have of characters and virtues or vices that you wanted to really bring up and explore? Andrew?
I think the first character when I think of the virtue of faith is Chirrut Imwe.
Yeah.
Because I just think I'm one with the Force is with me. I mean, he's a literal blind man who's relying on the Force to, to survive. And he believes, in it so deeply that, again, he was literally a martyr, So, like, what do you think of, like, as spirituality and you think of, really having faith and not having any fear at all. Like he's a good example of that. I mean, as a character that I think we only, he's in some of the animated stuff, right? I want to say, but really or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's only in Rogue One, maybe, but
I think he's appeared in a couple animated shorts, but really, I mean, a character that everyone got introduced to, and we see sort of we see the end of in Rogue One. He had that sort of impact, on the audience and on me in regards to this subject of virtue of faith. I think he was really the first person that I thought of.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but when I've gone to like Catholic events, I've literally heard the MC repeat, like, I am one with the Force and the Force is with me, but like not the Force, but they say like, right. I am one with Christ, or I'm one with the Spirit, or something like that. And it is very, not only a good illustration of someone who has that gift of faith, but also someone who practices faith, that in order to strengthen your faith, you really have to practice it and act on it. Like faith isn't just sort of an intellectual assent, but that it's this personal trust, that you put your life on the line because you believe in, in this case, the Force. But yeah, I love that.
Yeah, in the care that God has for us, in the in providence. It's a word we don't use a whole lot these days, I guess, but that idea that God will provide for us, and so having that trust in God, that I don't have to worry about what's going to happen to me. God has taken care of me. And that's exactly what Chirrut is feeling. It's like the Force is taking care of things. Everything will turn out well, if I, follow the will of the Force. And in that universe, I think it does turn out well for him. I think as sad as it is when he dies, it's a good death. And he is very much one with the Force in just as much a way that a martyr in the real world is one with Christ, right?
Yeah. And also that, there's that saying, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. His death inspires Baze, his friend who has just been this, just really jaded figure. And, he used to have faith, but he kind of gave it up and he just relies on his big gun, But at the end, after seeing his friend's act of faith, he echoes that, and that's really, I love that. It's so inspiring and it's true to life. Robert, what about you? What's another example you want to bring up?
I actually want to talk about Andor a little bit.
Okay.
And I don't know if I want to focus on the character of Cassian Andor specifically, but I want to talk a little bit about that arc in the middle where he's in prison, and there's that deep atmosphere of hopelessness among everyone, and that through seeing the possibility for something better, they are able to care for each other despite the rules against caring for each other. That they're able to find a way out and find hope in the middle of a situation that is designed to just quash all remnants of hope, to dehumanize everybody. And yet, if virtue is anything, it's the quality of being fully human, right? Being fully alive. And that persistence that that they have in being fully alive.
Right, that the Empire can't take that away from them. They refuse to let that go.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Andrew, what about you? Is there another? I think we have time for one more standout example.
Oh gosh. Well, Angela, do you have one? You're putting me on the spot here.
Well, I gave a few. I mean,
there was a little crossover. I definitely wanted to bring up Anakin, like we all did. But
well, I'll just throw some out there that I also had. For love or kindness, I said Omega.
Oh yeah.
She, overcomes a lot of challenges with love and kindness. Also for humility, other than Jar Jar Binks, I would say
yes.
Din Djarin. I think Din Djarin really displays humility in the sense of giving up a lot of his life and a lot of his, maybe comforts to fulfill a role, a vocation. And I think humility really is ultimately about being who you need to be and being who you are called to be. For prudence, Obi-Wan. I think.
Oh, yes.
Obi-Wan is just constantly making very prudent decisions, and probably why he was a good master for Anakin, because Anakin was very imprudent.
In a weird way, Palpatine also had a strong virtue of prudence.
And patience.
My gosh, patience.
Well, Yoda was very patient too. But Palpatine. Oh gosh.
Yeah, and then also for faith, I put Qui-Gon Jinn because I think he sort of tapped into the Force in a way that the rest of the Council really hadn't yet. And he put his faith in that relationship with the Force and that understanding of the Force. When he, recognized Anakin and his abilities and, maybe not when he changed the dice so that Anakin ended up, being able to be freed and everything. But, Yeah, I do think the way that he ended up having that understanding of being part of the living force, and yeah, I would say he was an example of faith.
Qui-Gon is maybe the most sort of realized example of like mature virtue. And maybe it's just because we didn't see enough of him to see where his vices lay and the development that he's gone through. But like I was thinking about Qui-Gon and I'm like, it's hard to see an area of his life where he wasn't exhibiting like a fully realized habit of virtue.
Yeah, I have a friend who thinks that Qui-Gon is the ultimate Jedi. Because of that, which is interesting.
Well, Rey probably has all the virtues.
You think?
I mean, except for chastity. I mean, she should never kiss Kylo Ren, but I
think she has a lot of fear.
She does have a lot of fear. Well, maybe I'm talking about Rey at the end. You know,
okay.
You kind of see her like literally the full power of the Force and all the Jedi. I mean, if that doesn't give you all the virtues, I don't know what would. But I guess we're going to see more of her. But she's a good representation, I think, of most of the virtues, at least.
I would say she's a good representation of like the beginning stage of growing in all the virtues.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. I would say, yeah.
There's the idea, and this could be a whole other podcast, which would have nothing to do with Star Wars, but like there's the idea of infused virtue, which is the grace that we receive through the sacraments, and this is where the theological virtues are infused in us. But then there's our acquisition of the virtues, which we do through the actions of our life, and that's when we kind of allow the grace that God has given us to work through us, or in the case of human virtues, just practice at the doing of good in those areas of life. And I think Rey is at the beginning of that journey. She's got the infusion of virtue, and now she needs to practice it and develop it.
That's great. I can use that against anyone who says I don't like Rey, because at least any Christian or Catholic, I'll just say, well, it's not her fault that she was infused with so much of the Force. Because I think she, for most of the sequels, she's just overwhelmed. She's just constantly overwhelmed. And not necessarily with the Force all the time, but just overwhelmed with like everything that's going on within her and outside of her and the story and yeah, and then you bring the Force into it. It's like, wow, she's definitely a beginner.
Totally, and that's why I think Robbie made a good point. Like she's in those beginning stages, and she has to like through practice sort of gain all these virtues, and it doesn't come from I take every opportunity to like just slam the whole she's Palpatine's granddaughter part. It's like, because none of her real power comes from that. Like sure, that's a big reason why she at the beginning of her journey, she's having all these like trials and these visions and this sort of like,
she has finger lightning though.
She does have finger lightning. Absolutely. Like, hey, if you got it, use it. But yeah, I think that's a good sort of way to look at her character. Is that she had to find her own way, and she had to. It wasn't like it's not like Luke's sort of journey where she sort of had to like resist it so much. Like no, I don't think anyone was afraid of her turning to the dark side. With Luke,
I think Luke was maybe.
No, I mean. I was going to get to that, except for Luke. And because Luke went through that himself. And I think he's like, again, one of Luke's, I guess, faults is because of going through that experience with his dad, is he kind of saw that in Kylo. And that led to the destruction that led to him almost killing Kylo, and then the destruction of his school, and then him going into, becoming a hermit for for a long time. And I think Rey represented like a lot of Luke's fears, but she sort of conquered all of them, and in most ways handled it better than Luke did. If you look at it, I guess on a surface level, at least. And I think she came out of it like, I don't think we have the same fears for her as we do, as we did, or for Luke, where she's gonna, hide off in a mountain and swear off the Jedi. It ends with hope, for her. And I think, and everything we're hearing about, like, I guess we're gonna see more of Rey in future movies. Like, it's gonna be more focused on that and centered around that. So, yay. Like happy Jedi character.
I look forward to the day when we will finally have like the Rey story completed, and then we can do a podcast just reflecting on the whole Rey character arc, because that will be a monster pot. That might have to be a 2-parter.
Yeah, maybe. At least, yeah.
Well, guys, I mean, this has been awesome, but we have run out of time already. But we want to hear everyone else's opinions and everyone else's examples of virtue and vice in Star Wars. So for those of you who are listening, please email us or send us some feedback. And you can do that through email, starwars@sqpn.com. You can find StarQuest on Facebook, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Leave a comment there. Or if you're on X, you can write to us at SQPN. And if you're interested in joining over 800 of our community members on Discord, you can do so at sqpn.com/Discord. And stay tuned here to the podcast for upcoming shows diving into deeper themes and meanings of Star Wars. So give us a shout out, whether it's about this topic or another Star Wars topic. We are Star Wars nerds here, and we appreciate every single one of your thoughts. So subscribe to the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app or at our YouTube channel for StarQuest Media. And if you want to find previous episodes elsewhere, you can go to sqpn.com/Star Wars. Well, guys, this was a lot of fun. So until next time, Robert King, thank you for joining the Secrets of Star Wars.
Thanks for having me.
And great to have you again, Andrew Hermiz.
Thanks again. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So once again, I am the one in the middle, the Bendu, Angela Sealana. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Doctor Who. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Doctor Who.